Jack Dorsey just fired 4,000 people. That's 40% of Block's workforce gone in one announcement. And here's the thing that should make you angry. Block reported $2.87 billion in gross profit. That's profit, not revenue. Profit. And that number was up 24% year over year. So the company is making more money than ever, and they're cutting 40% of their staff. How is that possible? What's the narrative that lets you do that and keep a straight face? Simple. Blame AI. Dorsey said, and I'm reading this directly, this is not driven by financial difficulty, but by the growing capability of AI tools. Not financial difficulty, growing capability of AI tools. And here's the kicker. The stock market loved it. Block's stock soared 24% after the announcement. Welcome back to Surviving AI with Carlo Thompson. And today we're talking about what might be the biggest coordinated sleight of hand in modern business, the AI layoff bluff. Because I've got data that will change how you think about what's happening at your company right now, and it's not what you think. And to help me unpack all of this, we are diving deep into some wild source material today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Artificial. System online.
And welcome, everyone, to this deep dive. What we are doing today is embarking on a very specific tactical mission.
We really need to break this down.
Exactly. Our objective for you listening is to completely expose this massive gaping chasm between the corporate rhetoric you just heard, this, polished, investor-friendly idea of inevitable AI job replacement, and the actual stark reality of the data.
Because the data tells a vastly different story than the press releases, doesn't it?
Oh, not even close. They're on different planets.
Yeah.
And by the end of this conversation, you're going to have a clear, actionable framework to interrogate your own company's narrative.
Which is so needed right now. People feel totally helpless.
Right. We want to arm you with the tools to see through the spin, reclaim your agency, and understand exactly what the executive suite is actually doing when they just casually drop the acronym AI into a layoff memo.
Okay, so let's unpack this immediately, because the block scenario I mentioned at the top, it is the absolute perfect template for what we are seeing across the entire corporate landscape right now. It's the playbook.
It really is. We need to deconstruct this because everyone is copying it. So they cut 4,000 jobs. Yeah. And if you look closely at our sources, those cuts were heavily concentrated in customer support.
Right.
Now, anyone who has ever worked in or even just adjacent to corporate operations knows that customer support is an area with notoriously high training costs.
Yeah, high training costs, incredibly high turnover. It's a massive line item on the budget.
Exactly. It's an expensive department to run.
Precisely. It's a high friction, high cost area. When you are an executive looking at a spreadsheet, trying to find ways to widen your profit margins, that department is always glowing red.
Right, but I want to push back on the immediate outrage for just a second. Let's play devil's advocate here.
Okay, let's do it.
Isn't it possible that AI actually is making these people redundant? I've used modern chatbots for customer service recently.
We all have, yeah. And sometimes they actually resolve my issue without me ever talking to a human being. So if a company deploys a tool that genuinely handles, say, 70 or 80% of those routine inquiries, like Dorsey claimed, why shouldn't they cut headcount?
That's the argument they make.
Right. If the tool works, isn't it just logical business practice to trim the excess?
See, that is exactly the logical trap the narrative relies on. It sounds perfectly reasonable on the surface, but we have to look at the financial mechanics beneath that claim.
Okay, break that down for me.
Let's follow your logic. If AI is genuinely doing the work of those 4,000 eliminated roles, and it's handling 80% of the volume seamlessly, then operational costs for that department should be absolutely plummeting.
Right. The cost to serve each customer just drops to fractions of a penny.
Exactly. So their margins get better. But look at the broader context of the business. Block was already posting a $2.87 billion gross profit.
Right. Not revenue gross profit.
Yes. And that was already up 24% year over year before this massive reduction in force even fully materialized on the balance sheet.
Wow.
They are not a company fighting for survival. They are swimming in cash. So the question isn't whether AI can make things more efficient.
It's why they're doing the layoffs.
Right. The question is why a hyper-profitable company chooses to translate that efficiency into mass termination rather than growth.
That's the disconnect. That's what drives me crazy, because if you are making nearly $3 billion in profit and you suddenly have 4,000 employees whose routine tasks are now handled by software, Why isn't a forward-thinking company reinvesting that immense human capital?
That's what a healthy company used to do.
Exactly. Why not transition those 4,000 people into, proactive customer success roles? Why not have them focus on high-touch enterprise clients?
Or product development or new market expansion. There were 100 ways to use trained staff.
Yes. Instead, it's like burning down your guest house and telling the neighborhood you're just optimizing your real estate for the future. They're just dumping 40% of their people onto the street and pointing at an algorithm as the culprit.
They are. And the reason they do it is because the market incentive structure actively discourages human reinvestment right now. We really have to understand how Wall Street values tech companies in the current macroeconomic climate to get why this bluff works.
Okay, so what's the climate right now compared to before?
Well, for the last decade, we were in a zero interest rate environment. Money was incredibly cheap. So the market rewarded pure growth, user acquisition at literally any cost.
Right, you just hired as many people as possible because headcount basically signaled expansion to investors.
Exactly. But the climate has shifted drastically. Interest rates are higher, capital is expensive. Now, the market rewards efficiency and austerity above almost everything else.
Wall Street loves cost-cutting.
They do, but historically, massive layoffs carry a huge stigma.
Right. Usually if a company fires 40% of its staff, investors panic. They think, oh no, the core business is failing, they're bleeding cash, abandon ship.
Exactly. A traditional mass layoffs signals distress. But when you cloak that exact same cost-cutting measure in the narrative of technological inevitability and forward-thinking AI innovation, you completely remove the panic. You transform a brutal reduction in force into a story of visionary leadership.
So you signal to Wall Street that you aren't shrinking because you have to, you are optimizing because you're living in the future.
Bingo. And the market rewarded block with a 24% bump in their stock price, simply for changing the narrative wrapper around a completely standard cost-cutting exercise.
It's infuriating because it's so transparent when you lay out the math. But Block is just the loud, highly visible example here.
They're just the ones doing it in plain sight.
Right. And the sources we have indicate this isn't just one company. This is a coordinated strategy across the broader economy. We need to look at what the people actually executing these layoffs are whispering behind closed doors.
Yes, the internal data is wild.
Because the data on the internal mechanics of these decisions is an absolute bombshell. Tell them about the survey.
Okay, so the survey data from our sources is arguably the most critical piece of evidence we have. We are looking at a really comprehensive survey of hiring managers.
The actual people inside these organizations?
Right, the people who are handed the mandate from the C-suite to actually execute these reductions. And a staggering 59% of these hiring managers explicitly admit to exaggerating AI's role in their company's layoffs.
Wait, hold on. Let me just repeat that. Almost 60%.
59%, yes.
They are outright confessing to inflating the narrative. I mean, are we sure they aren't just confused about how the technology is being applied?
What do you mean?
Well, a hiring manager isn't necessarily a software engineer, right? Maybe they just don't understand the AI integration and are misreporting it by accident.
It's a fair question, but no. The survey digs into their motivations, and that completely eliminates the confusion defense.
Okay, so they know what they're doing.
Oh, they know exactly what they're doing. When asked why they're exaggerating the role of AI in these layoffs, these hiring managers state, and this is a direct quote from the data, that blaming AI plays better with stakeholders than citing financial constraints.
Wow. Plays better with stakeholders.
Right, they aren't confused at all.
Yeah.
They are highly aware of the PR strategy. They are consciously running a spin campaign.
Okay, that is just wild. So it's a deliberate, calculated PR move. But let's break down the psychology of why this specific lie works so well. Because playing better with stakeholders is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence.
It really is. It works because of narrative control. Just imagine you are an executive for a second. You've overhired during a boom period, or maybe you mismanaged your annual budget, or frankly, you just want to squeeze a few more points of profit margin out of the quarter to hit the metrics for your own executive bonus.
Which happens all the time.
All the time. So you have two stories you can tell. Story A is the truth. We mess up our projections, or we just want more money, so we are firing thousands of you.
Yeah, telling story A makes the executives look like absolute villains.
Exactly. It makes them look incompetent to the board and greedy to the public.
Nobody wants to stand on an earnings call and say, we misjudged the market, so our employees have to pay the price with their livelihoods.
Precisely. Now look at story B. Artificial intelligence is advancing at an unprecedented historical rate. This is a technological tidal wave, and unfortunately, these specific roles are simply obsolete.
Oh, it's so sneaky. Telling Story B makes those exact same executives look like bold captains steering the ship through the stormy seas of the Fourth Industrial Revolution.
It's the perfect alibi. It shifts the blame from human error or corporate greed to an abstract, completely unstoppable force.
And crucially, and this is what I find so deeply manipulative about the whole thing, it completely deactivates employee resistance.
Oh, 100%.
Historically, workers will fight corporate greed, right? If a CEO is hoarding profits and slashing jobs, employees get angry. They might unionize, they strike, they protest, they leak internal documents to the press.
They push back.
Exactly. But workers generally do not fight inevitable progress. When you convince a workforce that a hyper-advanced machine has simply made them redundant, it breeds this crushing sense of fatalism.
You can't argue with an algorithm.
Right. You can't pick it against math. You just pack up your desk and leave quietly because you feel like you lost to the future.
That psychological neutralization is exactly why the AI narrative is so incredibly valuable to the C-suite. It buys them a frictionless layoff. But to fully grasp the scale of this bluff, we have to look at the massive chasm between what the media claims AI can do and what the data shows it is actually doing in the workplace.
This is where the numbers get really interesting.
Yeah.
Because our sources highlight this incredible gap.
The gap is huge.
On one hand, you have this terrifying narrative floating around everywhere that 93% of jobs have the potential for some disruption from AI. 93%.
Right.
That is the number that gets aggregated. That's the headline that generates clicks and panic. It makes everyone think their job is on the chopping block tomorrow.
But you have to remember, disruption is a very slippery word. When you read the actual analysis from institutions like the Darden Business School and our source stack, a very, very different picture emerges.
What does the data say?
Well, yes, 93% of jobs might use an AI tool eventually, but only 10% of roles are fully automatable.
Wait, only 10%?
Only 10%. And here's the most damning statistic of all.
Yeah.
Across the entire corporate landscape, only 9% of companies report actually fully replacing roles with AI.
Wow. Okay, so wait. Let me make sure I have the actual mechanics of this straight. If an AI tool comes out that can say, draft routine emails 20% faster,
Right.
or it can summarize my meeting notes in 5 seconds, that is a partial disruption. It makes a worker more efficient.
Yes.
But it doesn't do the entire job. It doesn't negotiate the contract. It doesn't build the client relationship. It doesn't navigate the internal office politics to actually get the budget approved.
Exactly. AI is currently automating tasks, not roles. That's the key distinction. But companies are taking that minor efficiency gain, that, partial disruption, and using it as a smokescreen to justify eliminating the entire role anyway.
So the gap between the 9% reality of actual job replacement and the 93% rhetoric of job disruption, isn't that exact gap the definition of a bluff?
That is the mathematical definition of the bluff, yes. And the proof that they aren't actually automating complex work is right there in the hiring data.
Oh, right, the entry-level data.
Yes. The sources show that 1 in 5 companies, 20%, have completely stopped hiring entry-level workers, and they explicitly cite AI as the reason.
Which should immediately raise a huge red flag. Just think about the mechanics of labor cost. If AI was truly this hyper-advanced intelligence capable of replacing human cognition and complex decision-making, where would a profit-driven company deploy it first?
They would deploy it against their most expensive employees.
Right. They would replace middle management or highly paid senior analysts or regional directors. You would automate the people making $150,000 a year to maximize your savings.
Precisely. But that's not what they are doing. They are freezing entry-level hiring instead. Cutting entry-level jobs isn't about automating complex, high-value work. It's about cost management at the absolute bottom of the payroll.
It's just cheaping out on the easiest targets.
Exactly. Entry-level roles are where people learn the business, right? It's where they understand the corporate culture and develop the nuanced judgment required for senior roles.
Yeah, it's the pipeline.
By freezing entry-level hiring and blaming a chatbot, these companies are executing a wildly short-sighted financial maneuver.
Yeah.
They're actively killing their future talent pipeline just to optimize today's balance sheet.
They are sacrificing the leaders and innovators of tomorrow to make this quarter's margins look marginally better to Wall Street. It's like a farmer eating his seed corn to survive the winter and then blaming the weather when he has nothing to plant in the spring. It's just unbelievable.
Exactly what it is.
But how do we actually prove this? Like if a company claims they are freezing roles or laying people off because of AI, what is the tell? How do we catch them?
The easiest way to catch a company in this bluff, to prove that this isn't about technological efficiency but rather about financial shell games, is to watch what they do with their open headcount immediately after they fire people.
Okay.
Let's look at the software company Atlassian. This is where the bluff becomes totally transparent.
Oh, right. The Atlassian case study in our sources is fascinating. Okay, so Atlassian lays off 1,600 people. That's roughly 10% of their entire workforce.
It's a huge cut.
And the public justification, they blamed the shift toward AI. They pointed at the technology, claiming they needed to realign their business for the future.
That was the PR spin.
But simultaneously, literally at the exact same time, they're sending 1,600 people to the unemployment line. Atlassian opened up hiring for 800 new employees, specifically for AI-related roles. Things like prompt engineering and AI operations.
This is a textbook example of what we call the cut and redirect. Let's look at the financial and structural mechanics of what's actually happening here.
Please do.
If a company is genuinely automating its workforce, if software is truly replacing human labor across the board, the total headcount should shrink permanently. The payroll expense should drop and stay down.
Because the machine is doing the work now.
Exactly. But that's not what Atlassian did. This isn't an AI replacing human story. It is a skill composition shift. They decided they wanted a different type of worker, so they discarded the old ones and bought new ones.
It's like a sports team. I mean, imagine a football team trades away their entire defensive line and uses all that salary cap space to buy 3 incredibly expensive superstar quarterbacks.
Right.
They aren't shrinking the team due to efficiency. They are completely changing the playbook to chase a new meta. They just decided defense wasn't their priority anymore.
That's a great analogy.
But when a sports team does it, we call it a restructuring. When a tech company cuts 1,600 jobs and hires 800 different ones, why do we let them call that an AI layoff? It's just corporate restructuring.
We let them call it that because until now, employees and the general public just haven't had the vocabulary or the data to call out the playbook. We haven't understood the financial mechanics behind it.
It's just taken their word for it.
Exactly. And if we look at the macro view from our sources, this Atlassian behavior is everywhere. In early 2026 alone, there were over 45,000 confirmed tech layoffs.
45,000?
Yes. But when you dig into the data, only about 20% of those were explicitly linked to AI. Now, that is up from 8% the previous year, showing the narrative is definitely gaining traction.
Right.
But it still means that 80% of layoffs are happening for standard, age-old business reasons over hiring, bad product launches missing revenue targets. Yet the AI narrative completely hogs the spotlight in the press.
I want to dive into the financial mechanics of this a bit deeper because the sources mention this phenomenon of the quiet rehire, and I think it exposes the plumbing of this bluff perfectly.
Oh, the quiet rehire is a massive part of this.
Yeah, HR executive highlights that many of the workers who are laid off due to quote-unquote AI automation are being quietly rehired in the exact same industry doing very similar work.
It happens constantly.
Or, even worse, a company fires its full-time staff, claims AI took the jobs to get the stock bump we talked about, and then immediately hires external contractors or outsourced services to do the exact same tasks.
Let's break down why a company would do that, because it all comes down to how Wall Street values different types of corporate spending.
Okay, let's get into the weeds.
When you have a full-time employee, they are considered an operating expense, or OPEX. They come with salaries, healthcare benefits, 401k matches, payroll taxes, and severance liabilities. Wall Street heavily scrutinizes fixed OPEX because it drags down profit margins.
Right, full-time employees are expensive and hard to get off the books quickly if the market turns.
Exactly. Now, when a company outsources that exact same work to an external contractor or a managed service provider, it often gets categorized differently on the ledger. It might be tied to a specific project budget, or it becomes a flexible expense that can be turned off with 30 days notice.
Ah, so it looks better on paper.
Way better. When a company outsources the work right after an AI layoff, it is the ultimate proof that the work itself never disappeared. The tasks still need to be completed by human beings. The work just moved off the internal, highly scrutinized full-time payroll and onto a cheaper external contractor ledger.
Wow.
That is classic, ruthless financial restructuring, completely cloaked in glowing AI branding.
It's Brilliant in a deeply cynical way. It's infuriating because it's so transparent once you understand the financial mechanics.
It really is.
But the problem is, when you are the one sitting in the HR office being handed a severance package, and they are using all these high-level buzzwords, it's the algorithm, it's the inevitable shift in our operational matrix, it's incredibly hard to fight back in the moment. You feel small.
Which is exactly why we need to pivot from understanding the macro problem to providing a micro solution. We are going to give you the exact framework to detect if your company is running this playbook on you right now.
Yes. Let's get to the tactical stuff.
Because if we know that 59% of hiring managers are exaggerating, and we know the work isn't actually disappearing, you need a lie detector. We've synthesized the source material into a 7-point bluff detection framework.
Okay.
This isn't just theory. This is a diagnostic tool you can use to interrogate the narrative in real time.
Okay, let's put this into practice. Imagine your company just called an impromptu all-hands meeting. The CEO looks somber. They announce a massive restructuring, claiming AI efficiencies are forcing a 15% reduction in force.
Okay.
How do you actually diagnose this? Let's walk through the framework.
The very first thing you do, point number 1, is look at the financials. Are profits up or down?
Yeah.
This goes right back to the block example we started with. If AI is truly eliminating roles through sheer efficiency, those cost savings must show up in the financials. Healthy, growing profits combined with mass layoffs almost always equal a narrative-driven choice.
So if your company is boasting about record revenue on an earnings call to investors on Tuesday, and then handing out pink slips on Wednesday blaming robots, they are lying to you.
They are completely lying. Real financial distress looks like missing revenue targets, shrinking margins, and loss of market share.
Right. I mean, if the ship is sinking, layoffs make tragic sense. If the ship is winning the race and they start throwing people overboard, they're just trying to make the boat lighter to break a speed record.
Exactly.
Okay, so you check the profits.
Yeah.
What's the next thing you look for while you're sitting in that town hall?
You look at the job boards. Point 2, is the company hiring elsewhere? This is the Atlassian test we just discussed. Look for the cut and redirect. If management announces they are laying off 1,000 people in the customer success department, but you go on LinkedIn and see they've immediately opened up hundreds of requisitions for data engineers, prompt specialists, or even marketing roles in a new region, they are not being automated out of existence.
They are undergoing a strategic restructuring.
Exactly. They are simply using AI as a convenient scapegoat to avoid the bad PR and internal panic of a standard layoff.
I feel like point 3 is the easiest one to spot if you've been paying attention to your company's internal communications. It's all about talk versus implementation.
Oh, this is a big one.
Because if a company is genuinely automating 15% of its workforce, that doesn't happen overnight. Did your executive team publicly invest in massive AI infrastructure 12 to 18 months ago? Have there been pilot programs, beta tests, integration protocols, and endless meetings about data security?
Exactly. Real enterprise AI integration takes years. It requires massive capital expenditure, data cleaning, compliance reviews, and training.
It's a huge undertaking.
It is. Or ask yourself, did the word AI mysteriously appear for the absolute first time in the 3rd paragraph of the layoff memo?
Yeah.
If leadership is suddenly talking about AI at every town hall, but you haven't seen a single new proprietary tool deployed on your desktop, it's a bluff. You simply do not automate a massive chunk of a corporate workforce overnight with a basic ChatGPT subscription.
Which leads right into the financial proof. Let's talk about point 4. Actual cost savings and ROI.
Right. If a company claims AI is doing the work, they must have the math to back it up. You must look for the quantified return on investment.
Because genuine functional automation leaves a massive, highly measurable paper trail of efficiency.
Exactly.
Right.
There are deployment costs, software licensing fees, massive cloud compute costs, and a very clear metric of human hours saved per week. If management cannot point to a specific quantified cost-saving metric derived from a specific named AI tool, the story is fabricated.
But hold on, let me push back here. What if you actually ask leadership for that ROI? Say you're brave enough to stand up at the town hall and say, can you share the efficiency metrics that justify these cuts?
That's for you if you do.
And they pull the classic corporate deflection. Well, those internal metrics are confidential, or we're still analyzing the long-term data, but the trend is clear. How do you counter that?
You don't necessarily have to counter it out loud because that refusal is your answer.
What do you mean?
Think about standard corporate behavior. Companies that are executing real highly profitable automation love to brag about their ROI to anyone who will listen.
Oh, they do.
They will put it on a slide deck in 72-point font for their shareholders. They will issue press releases about how they reduced ticket resolution time by 80%. They want the world to know how incredibly efficient and cutting edge they are.
So silence is deafening.
Silence evasion, or claims of confidentiality regarding efficiency metrics, almost always means the emperor has absolutely no clothes.
That is such a crucial tell. If it was working, they wouldn't shut up about it.
Yeah.
Okay, point 5 is about the nature of the work itself. Which roles are actually targeted? We touched on this with the entry-level freeze.
Right.
You have to ask yourself, is the work genuinely disappearing, like routine high-volume data entry or basic document sorting?
Right, because those are tasks AI can actually do today, but you have to look closely at what is supposedly being automated. If a company is cutting roles that rely heavily on complex human relationship building, nuanced negotiation, navigating ambiguity, or high-stakes judgment calls, and they are claiming AI is picking up the slack, it's a bluff.
Exactly. AI isn't closing million-dollar enterprise sales deals over steak dinners. It isn't reading the room during a tense contract negotiation.
No, it isn't.
It isn't sensing that a client is frustrated and needs a little extra empathy.
Yeah.
If they are cutting relationship-driven roles, they're just cutting costs and hoping the remaining staff can absorb the extra work.
Which brings us to point 6, which requires a bit of institutional memory. What is the timeline? Were these specific departments or roles targeted for elimination or budget cuts long before the AI boom hit the news cycle?
Oh, this happens all the time. A CEO will have a specific division they've wanted to gut for years because of underperformance, or maybe just because they don't like the vice president running it.
Office politics are very real.
But they couldn't do it without causing a political nightmare internally or spooking the board. Suddenly, generative AI makes the cover of every business magazine, and that CEO realizes they finally have the perfect, blameless excuse.
Exactly.
They can execute the cuts they've always wanted to make and just slap an AI optimization label on the memo.
It's the ultimate convenient excuse.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the final piece of the diagnostic framework, point 7.
Yeah.
What's the alternative explanation?
The reality check.
Yes. When you look at the layoffs, take the word AI out of the equation completely for a second. Look at the broader business context. Is there a recent merger or consolidation that created redundant roles? Has there been a major leadership change, like a new CFO who was explicitly brought in to slash expenses and make their mark? Did a massive, highly funded product pivot just fail miserably in the market?
In almost every case, if you look closely, the alternative explanation fits the data perfectly. The company overhired during a boom, interest rates went up, the new product tanked, and the new CFO needed to balance the books. The AI narrative is just a thin coat of paint hastily applied over standard corporate restructuring.
Exactly. And I want to emphasize a crucial meta insight that ties this entire 7-point framework together. Based on all the behavioral and financial data in our sources, companies that are actually executing real fundamental automation do it silently.
Wait, really? Why wouldn't they want to broadcast that they are becoming hyper-efficient? Didn't we just say they love to brag about ROI?
They brag to their investors in closed earnings calls, yes.
Right.
But they do not send out dramatic public press releases about replacing humans with machines.
Why not?
They don't want to alert their competitors to their specific operational efficiency gains. They don't want to invite regulatory scrutiny. And most importantly, they certainly don't want to prematurely terrify their remaining staff and trigger a mass exodus of top talent before the automation is fully integrated.
Oh, that makes total sense. You don't want your best engineers leaving before the system is even up and running.
Exactly. So the loud broadcasted announcements, the CEOs giving somber interviews on financial news networks about the hard choices forced upon them by the pace of AI, are almost always pure narrative management.
Right.
If a company answers your questions with vague buzzwords like, we are leveraging large language models internally to optimize cross-functional workflows, rather than pointing to specific measurable systems like our newly integrated proprietary CRM model resolves 75% of Tier 1 tickets without human escalation, they are bluffing you.
Okay, so let's bring this down to the ground level. Imagine you're that listener sitting in the town hall. You've run the test. You applied the 7 points to the massive restructuring your company just announced. And your company failed miserably. Profits are up. They're hiring heavily in a new division. The CEO just learned how to spell AI yesterday. There is zero documented ROI, and they are cutting relationship-based roles. You know for a fact they're bluffing. Now what? You can't just stand up, point at the C-suite, and yell liars. You'll be escorted out of the building.
No, you definitely shouldn't do that.
So how do you actually use this knowledge to protect yourself and your livelihood?
This is where we move from analysis to action. Because having the knowledge without a strategy for application just leaves you frustrated and cynical. The first step in reclaiming your agency is to ruthlessly audit your own role.
Audit your role. How?
You need to identify precisely what aspects of your daily work a machine cannot do. We are talking about complex judgment, building genuine client trust, navigating cross-functional office politics, and high-level strategic planning.
The human stuff.
Exactly. You must aggressively pivot your daily focus toward building value that cannot be reduced to a procedural checklist. If your job can be mapped out on a simple flowchart, you are vulnerable to the bluff because you are easy to replace with cheaper labor, whether that's software or an outsourced contractor.
So you have to make yourself the human exception. And part of that means skilling up in AI literacy yourself. I think this is where a lot of people get intimidated.
Oh, absolutely.
They think, I'm in marketing, I'm not a software engineer, I can't compete with AI. But you don't need to go back to school to become a machine learning expert. You absolutely must, however, know the fundamental mechanics of what AI can and cannot actually do within your specific industry.
Exactly. Let's take large language models, or LLMs, as an example, since they are driving most of this current panic. If you understand how they work, you understand their limitations.
Right. An LLM isn't a reasoning engine. It's a predictive text engine.
Yeah.
It is essentially looking at vast amounts of data and guessing the most statistically likely next word. It doesn't know what it's saying. It doesn't understand truth or falsehood. It only understands statistical probability.
Which is why they hallucinate. They confidently invent facts because those facts fit the statistical pattern of a plausible sentence. Now, if you are the person in your department who understands that mechanism, you instantly spot the danger when your boss tries to suggest replacing your compliance team with a chatbot.
Right.
You become the invaluable person in the room who can say, actually, because current LLMs rely on predictive probability rather than deterministic logic, they hallucinate too frequently to handle our rigid regulatory compliance documentation without intense human oversight. If we fully automate this, we are exposing the company to massive legal liability.
That makes you invaluable. You aren't fighting the technology, you are managing its risk. You are positioning yourself as the necessary human in the loop.
Furthermore, well, not furthermore, but you need to network and prepare for the long game. Look at the macroeconomic incentive structures we've discussed today. If a company runs the AI layoff bluff once and their stock goes up 24% like Block's did, what do you think they're going to do next year when earnings are a little light?
They will run the exact same play. They will do it again because the market rewards it.
The cycle will repeat. You must anticipate this. Do not get comfortable just because you survived the first round of cuts. Prepare your exit strategy. Update your resume to highlight the complex, non-automatable value you bring. And most importantly, build your network outside the blast radius of your current employer.
And when the rumors start circulating again or the next town hall happens, you have to ask the hard questions in writing. You have to force specificity from management.
Yes, in writing is key.
Don't let them hide behind buzzwords in a verbal meeting. Send an email. Ask them directly. To ensure a smooth transition, can leadership clarify? Is the work itself being automated away by a specific software tool? Or is my role being reallocated to an external vendor? That distinction is everything. It forces them to put the lie in writing, which they hate doing.
If we pull back and look at the massive picture painted by all our sources combined, the AI layoff bluff is actually a dangerous distraction for society as a whole.
It really is.
Because we are spending all our energy arguing with these companies about whether jobs are vanishing into the ether, we are completely failing to negotiate the actual transition. The workforce is shifting, yes. But instead of fighting over the ghosts of automation, we should be fighting for robust retraining programs paid for by these hyper-profitable corporations.
Yes.
We should be demanding exponentially better severance packages when restructuring occurs. We should be advocating for stronger social safety nets. Instead, we are paralyzed by a manufactured ghost story.
I think that's the core of it. If we keep buying the bluff, we keep nodding along with our heads down when they say progress is inevitable, We're basically letting the wizard stay behind the curtain. We're spending all our time negotiating with the big, scary, booming Oz projection instead of looking at the very human guy pulling the levers who is just trying to optimize his Key 3 bonus.
That's exactly what's happening.
When you realize that technology doesn't make decisions, human CEOs make decisions, and they just use the technology as a convenient excuse, you realize you actually have leverage. You don't have to just accept a terrible severance package or a doubled workload just because they threw the word algorithm at you.
Exactly. It's time to pull back the curtain. You must make your career decisions from a place of absolute clarity, not from a place of manufactured corporate fear. If your company has announced layoffs or restructuring, or if you're hearing a lot of vague, ominous talk about AI disrupting your department, use the framework.
Run the test.
Go through the 7 points. Ask your manager or your leadership directly. Where are the actual cost savings? What is the specific quantified ROI on our AI investments? Which specific roles are being eliminated due to true automation? And why those roles? If they cannot answer those questions clearly and with data, that is your undeniable signal that this is narrative-driven, not technology-driven. Then make your decision about your future.
Think about this as we wrap up. If executives are successfully using AI as the ultimate scapegoat for mass layoffs today, and they're doing it with zero pushback from the market, the regulators, or the media, what happens tomorrow? When a massive, expensive strategic pivot fails entirely, when a highly funded product launch completely tanks and loses millions, or when a toxic workplace culture is finally exposed to the public, will they just blame unpredictable AI algorithms for that too? Where does human executive accountability actually start when the machine becomes the perfect, unquestionable corporate alibi? Keep an eye out for that at your next all-hands meeting.
Thanks for listening. Join us next time on Surviving AI.